Hello, Florida. This is Joe Mullins of the Live Workshop Play Show, and welcome back to another amazing weekend in the greatest state in the greatest country. And we are enjoying so much sports, so much entertainment, so much tourism, so much of everything. Some of the best agriculture in the world comes out of our great state. And with me today is no more than our future next governor of the great state of Florida. We've got Speaker Paul Renner. Speaker Renner, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe. Great to be here.
Now, as next governor, how are you going to keep this momentum? As our next governor, how are you going to keep this momentum that we're seeing in this state? I mean, let's just break it down real quick. Agriculture, it's the number two for our state driven in the community, but it's one of the world. Our cattlemen, our vegetables, our potato chips, just out of Flagler County, which is a county you and I both know well. I served in and you served for. Um, how are we going to continue this and protect the great state of Florida in the agriculture part?
Well, you're absolutely right. And during COVID, people talked about food insecurity, and most of us are thinking, "What is that?" Which means you may go into the grocery store and there's no meat, or there's no bread, or there's no milk. And remember some of the
Yeah.
milk the issues that some of the pregnant women had. And so we've got to make sure we preserve our agriculture. And you're right. Some of the dominant agriculture in the whole eastern seaboard comes right out of our state, and a lot of people don't know that. We've got to preserve it. We have an amendment on the ballot next year to remove tangible property taxes from our farmers. I think that's a good idea. We've got to make them competitive with some folks in other parts of the world that get subsidized, that don't have the same growing practices, that their food just not as good and healthy as our food is. We want to take care of our farmers and ranchers.
Now, you brought up a good point there. You were talking about property taxes, and I'm going to immediately jump into that as we go through. So Florida is a no income state tax, and I can't tell you how many states I go to that start campaigning. We want to be like Florida. We want to be like Florida. We want to get rid of Georgia right now. The next governor, that the guy that's running for governor that wants to be the next governor of Georgia is strongly campaigning on removing and ending the property tax. Or I'm sorry, not the property tax, the state income tax. He says, we want to be like Florida. Florida's even stepped it up a notch now and said they want to remove their property tax. Now, we don't have a state income tax. We have a property tax. That's a very big and wild loan. If we do that, we're going to be one of the first states to do that. We'll see how it works. But we were the first state, really one of the first states to remove the income tax, the state income tax. And look how well it's worked out. What is your thoughts on this property tax and eliminating it completely?
Well, our property taxes are higher than a state like Georgia because we don't have an income tax. And so that property tax funds your local sheriff's department, your schools, your local infrastructure. And so you've got the homestead property where people are Florida residents and they bought a home. And then you've got your non-homestead, which are your people that live in an apartment or they renters, and also all your small businesses and medium and large size businesses that are renting, that own property. And so that's non-homestead. And so I think where we are right now is we've got to make sure government faster than our salaries or our wages can keep up. Since 2019, property taxes have gone up 23%, twice the rate here in Florida. And so people's incomes haven't gone up that much. And so what I want to see is some kind of substantial relief, and then look for going forward in growth, what growth keep up with that population growth, growth in their citizens, but not out right now. As in many counties, it's been outstripped where you have and people are leaving their homes that have lived there 20, 30 years because they can no longer afford both the property taxes and the insurance. We cannot let that happen. And so at the same time, we got to balance, the needs of our first responders, our law enforcement, our schools, and our infrastructure. If you cut too much too fast, you could really disrupt that. We talked about that offline a little bit. And so it's really about balance, try to get some substantial relief, protect our seniors, maybe our first-time home buyers that are really struggling to get into a home because of the high cost, and make sure we still take care of core services.
Now, you talk about the property and you talk about it being a little higher in the state of Georgia or other states around. I own property in both states. I am seeing now our property tax in Georgia, a lot of the investment real estate I have, even with the state income tax, that property tax is equivalent in some areas than Florida. So I think we're still sitting better, but I attribute this to wasteful spending in government, them going out and things or putting programs in that just don't make sense. Florida's been a really, really strong proponent to stand strong and make sure we spend. We've now got our own Doge program here in the state of Florida. What's your thought about the spending with the local governments, and how would you, as next governor, try to control that and help make sure it's accountable? We're not putting holograms in the airport that are
Exactly.
$80,000 of taxpayers'
Exactly.
money.
There's no question. Not only is there waste, there's corruption. And so not only would I can to work with our CFO and others to doge local governments, but also the state government. There's places where we can reduce duplication, find something that's a wasteful spending. I guarantee you it's there. And unfortunately, a lot of times in government, people think of it as their money. It's really our money as taxpayers. And as I said, that whatever government must do, it must do, but all the rest of it should be in pocket with the tax relief and not being taxed nice to have or desirable programs that some special interest wants to see funded by the taxpayers. There's a lot of that. So once we get past public safety, infrastructure, education, we ought to look really, really carefully at whether we need to spend in all these other areas. And when you cut that back, that makes cutting property taxes a lot easier, because what I want to see is some relief on property tax without replacing sales tax, without replacing it with something else that is just going to solve one problem by creating a new problem. And if you're taking the same amount of money out of people's pockets, what have you really done?
Now I'm going to flip my hat here and talk as a sports and entertainment agent in the field there, the career that I have. So many events that were held across the country now are looking for new homes. They're looking for new places. It's almost dreadful when we have events out in California now because people are going, we don't want to go out. And rightfully so. The last event we had was a national championship. One of our clients was sitting at a skybox, and she was a 74-year-old lady. She touched the countertop, rubbed her eyes. Next thing we know, she fell to the ground and she started turning ghost white.
Wow.
She had the paramedics came in. We thought she was having a heart attack. They said, "Oh my God, this lady's exposed to fentanyl."
Fentanyl.
And immediately her
Wow.
husband said, "My wife has never touched a drug. She doesn't do stuff like this. We're good Southern Baptist Christian
Right.
people." And what we found out that one of the servers or one of the staff members had been doing fentanyl off the counter, cocaine or type fentanyl off the
Wow.
counter, left a little residue. People don't want to go there because of public safety. They don't want to go there and walk over all the homeless people, all the camps there. They don't want to go out there and see all the trash and the filth that's going on. So they're looking to bring these events over. As governor, how do you protect that? And how do you continue to put us on the forefront of bringing events that bring billions of dollars to the industry?
Well, and you see cities and counties and states that are sanctuary cities, or that allow, this defund the police mentality where they don't respect cops, where crime has spiked. And here in Florida, we honor our cops. We take care of law enforcement. We let them do their jobs. That's why we don't need the National Guard in Florida, because we let them do their jobs and they take care of business. So I'll always have the back of our law enforcement, our sheriffs, our police chiefs, and the men and women who serve in those capacities. And that is the first priority of government. You've got to get that right, because if you don't get that right, businesses can't thrive. Kids can't walk to and from school. They can't play in the streets because the streets aren't safe. Same thing with illegal immigration. We've seen the influx of these gang members that are coming across the border. We will always be a state that respects law and order. When I'm governor, I will be the only prosecutor race. And so I understand what it means to stand up for victims. I understand what it means to put bad people behind bars that are going to continually come back and reoffend and hurt people. It's one thing if a guy's a young guy and does things that are young and dumb and don't hurt anybody, to give them a second chance. It's a different thing to have these violent habitual criminals that people are letting out over and over again with no bond, and just letting them back on the streets, and they reoffend within days, if not hours.
Now, when you took office and I took office, biggest topics, and it still is big and looming over the state, is infrastructure issues, where they've not addressed and dealt with it. Took office, there was a huge one, uh, about septic tanks and the red tide. Here it is, 2025. We were in 2018. That was one of the biggest headlines on the news is the red tide in the Indian River and all the pollution coming up and the devastation. Many said it's too late. It's not going to be able to be solved. It's not going to be a problem. Today in 2025, you don't even hear about it anymore. That's the things, the coast, the attractions we have here, the beautiful parks, the beautiful oh God, the in the rivers, the streams, the alligators, the nature, um, the caverns, stuff like that. So much stuff in Florida. How as governor do you continue to Florida the number one tourist destination in the world?
Well, it's about quality of life, and we have a family-friendly mindset. We were talking about Las Vegas here a little bit ago, and, that's fine for Las Vegas, but we're all about fun in the sun, parks, recreation, theme parks, all those things are what drives people to Florida. So looking after our beaches and making sure they're re-nourished when they need to be re-nourished. I mentioned our, environment, making sure you can go out and catch fish. We're the fishing capital. You can catch fish that you catch. That's if people lose that. If they think it's a dirt they're not going to come anymore. If they think it's an unsafe place to come, they're not going to bring their kids down to Universal or what have you, or Marineland. And so we've got to make sure that we continue to have a place that's safe, the place that's family friendly, and we don't mix our brand with anything else. That's a winning formula for Florida. Those visitors help pay a lot for our schools, our roads, our bridges, and we want them to continue to do so. The best tax paid by someone not from Florida, not
So
paid by Floridians.
happy let the people that are doing the impact to the area pay, not the people that living in it to have. What do you think some of the biggest issues that Florida's faced with?
Well, affordability is one. We talked about property taxes. Insurance another one. We took a big stab at that. We had 7 or 8% of the population in the homeowners claims in the country. So people that had a claim, they had a hurricane, they filed a claim. Of the ones that turned it into litigation in the country, we were 26% of every lawsuit in the country, because we had these wide open, heads I win, tails you lose kind of rules. And so we pared that back. We also put accountability on insurers. So we focused on the consumer and said, what's good for the consumer? Let's get the gamesmanship out of the lawsuits to lower costs and restore and heal our insurance property market. But also look at insurers and say, look, you got to pay claims as fast as you take premiums. You got to be able to allow somebody to use their cell phone to send to an adjuster when you don't have adjusters to come 2 weeks after a hurricane. And if you engage in a pattern or practice that's not right, where you're not taking care of customers, we'll hammer you. We raise those penalties as well. By having that balanced approach and looking at the consumers, we've seen progress, and we did other reforms in my first year as speaker. We see auto insurance rates are going up everywhere in the country. They're going down in Florida, 6 to 10%. Nothing's going down in this country in price. We see auto rates going down. Homeowners is stabilized. We're going to see benefit from those reforms as a lot of the old lawsuits are filed into the old laws. And so I can give you an example about how that happened is, you come out of Publix or Walmart and a guy standing with a clipboard and says, hey, got a crack in your windshield. And you said, well, that's funny. I didn't have a crack in my windshield when I went in Walmart. And he says, well, if you'll sign your policy over to me, I'll take care of it. And here's, some tickets to the Bucks game or what have you. And next thing you know, you're in a lawsuit. You're in a lawsuit because you signed your policy away and they've overcharged for it. And they're working with a group of lawyers, and then they get attorney's fees, or they get one more than what the insurance company would offer. And so that $20,000-$30,000 goes a pool bill and skyrocket. That's after our reforms are brought every year. Before the reform, 1,000 of those windshield cases every year in the state of Florida.
Wow. So much going on with the insurance, and that's such a big topic. I would ask you this: you're talking about insurance, condos, the association fees. You and I saw a devastating movement with condos being kept up, and then all of a sudden the government put in the regulation, and you and I've had a lot of conversation about it. It's a lot to put on. You talked about the extreme stopping property taxes and the extreme movements in government. It has to be grown or tweaked. It can't be moved so aggressively. These condos owners are literally losing their homes because condo association um, uh, assessments have tripled and doubled what their normal association payments are. How do you see, as the next governor, you can help that situation?
Well, it's always looking at balance. And in that case, the response was, we're never going to let this happen again. So people had, in the case of Surfside, let maintenance go and fundamental structural stuff go for years and years and years. And it was expensive and they didn't want to have to spend that money. And so the bill said, okay, you got to have an assessment and you got to, get caught up like right away. Well, I mean, that's just too much to, as you said, to put on people. And so I know they've started moving toward the center of that place to land, maybe giving some people some figuring out a way to do some letter of credit or either to have a 5 or 10 year period to pay that off so you can make sure your building's not going to collapse because that's important. But at the same time, you're not saying, hey, you got to pay the bill of 20 years like right now, because if you do that, as you said, people are losing their condos as a result.
Way too much stress. So many of the different owners have come and said they can't afford it. They're fixed incomes. All of a sudden, their association dues have gone from 1,000 a month to 2 and 3,000, which is higher than their mortgage payments. And it's been so devastating. I remember in conversations you and I had, yeah, we've got to hold accountability, but we got to figure out a way, government, to help kind of cushion that and transition it, maybe short-term loans, things like that. And I love that approach because it's not just throwing the problem out there, it's giving a solution and giving aid. Hey guys, we need to get this done, but we're here to help you. This is how we're going to do it. That's the right kind of government to have. And that you showed me as an elected official that should be done on a local level and on a state level as well. So I've always appreciated that. And I love that input that you put in. What do you think is some of the issues that we have faced towards our school boards and our schools, our kids, and moving forward?
Well, we have good schools, but they can be a lot better. And I'll tell you, the main concern I have is we have almost 40%, depending on what county you're in, that cannot read on grade level in the third grade. And if you can't do that, then you can't learn because you have to learn to read to learn. And then their future is not very good. If you just look out into the future, if they don't hit that mark. So there's a lot we need to do. There's a lot of ideas among other states that people I've talked to around the country to make sure we get those kids up to speed. That would be a priority on the K-12 side. At higher ed, I'll tell you, we still haven't gotten there yet. The governor's done a great job of trying to move a lot of the left-wing indoctrination out, but we're not there yet. And I can tell you, having voted down this guy that was a cultural Marxist at University of Florida, I'm on the board of governors, and it was the right thing to do. I was proud to do it. But I got emails from faculty members. These are the liberal faculty. More of them than not said, "Thank you for saving the university. We're afraid we're going to get fired by even sending this email, or not going to get promoted because there's still this culture that does not allow and suppresses any kind of dissent from left-wing orthodoxy." And so we're going to put a stop to that when I'm governor. We're going to continue to lean in aggressively for higher ed reform, so a guy like Charlie Kirk can go into a college campus and be welcomed. And let's have a robust debate. And if you've got the better argument, maybe you'll win. But if you don't, you have to respect that and you have to learn, and maybe you might learn something and get your mind positioned in the right way towards the truth.
Our justice system in the state of Florida, very crucial. We've watched it on a national level be used and weaponized against Americans, Republicans, people that have different views, conservative values. How is next governor are you going to be able to preserve Florida clean and free from all of that coming in and infiltrating the state?
Yeah, well, we have to make sure we don't do what the left does. And so that means respecting free speech. That means respect law. It's something that I see it happen here, then, and people are being prosecuted politically, I would remove that person that's doing that if that's a state attorney. And Monique Worrell in Orlando was removed by the governor because she's not enforcing the law. The rule of law and protecting our citizens is the number one job, certainly of the prosecutor, and she's failing. And so I would look at these situations, and if I see that pattern continue, then I would not hesitate, like this governor has, to remove an officer that is flagrantly violating the law or choosing to not enforce laws they don't like. Look, I've had to, as a prosecutor, I've had to do things, or we all have had to follow laws we don't particularly like because it's the law. And so that's really important, because if we pick and choose, then when the other side's in power, they'll pick and choose. And that's no way to live in a just society and a good society. We've got to respect the law for everybody.
People talk about legalizing marijuana. It was on our bill just the last election. I know as a father, I know as a sports and entertainment agent that travels to many different areas, the disaster that brings to communities, being able to walk out and not have the freedom of taking fresh breath of air. We were talking about Vegas a little while ago. Last time I was in Vegas, I literally was standing near a bus stop and I couldn't breathe. It was so infested with marijuana or the smoke. It wasn't municipal. It wasn't help for health. It was people sitting there smoking as the day went on, pandering money, looking for money. And the police, I asked them, I said, y'all going to let them do that? And they said, there's nothing we can do about it. We've got elected officials that don't feel like if we do anything or we prosecute them, we're being mean to them. How, as governor, do you keep that kind of stuff out of the state? And how do we keep a law? I don't know what the right answer is, but I know being 14 years in recovery, I certainly don't need to be walking out in my streets breathing a drug, and hoping I get back in without relapsing or going back on it. How do we keep that freedom and that safety out of the in the state of Florida and that stuff out?
Well, I oppose the marijuana amendment. I'll oppose it again. And more importantly, is it wasn't in my job description to do so, but I went out and campaigned Amendment 4, the extreme abortion amendment, opposed Amendment 3, and I'll do that again as governor. Those amendments were funded, literally funded by George Soros and people like him that want to jam their left-wing agenda into our Constitution. And so they need to be called out. A governor has to campaign, has to raise money, or that will pass. Both of those amendments would have passed, but for the governor, for me, for many others that leaned in. We had churches that were active in opposing the abortion amendment. Unless all of that happened, either one or both of those would have passed. And so it's really about leadership. And the thing on marijuana is, we have medical marijuana. And if you're stressed out and you want to you can smokable marijuana, you can do that in the state of Florida already. We don't need that amendment. And a lot of the marijuana companies said, no, we just want medical. That's all we want. We're never going to go for recreational until they did. And so we're going to see a repeat of that. You need a governor who's going to go out and stop.
I got to ask you this as we wind up, and it's an important question. If we don't talk about this one topic on this show, we've really missed one of the biggest headlines: immigration. How do you feel with immigration in the state of Florida when we have so many immigrants? We've got so many blended families that are now Latin American, people from South America, people from other parts of the country that now have blended in and they have kids. What is your approach on immigration and your thoughts there?
Well, first of all, we do what President Trump has done successfully. And as someone pointed out, we don't need new laws. We needed a new president to stop the flow of people across the border. He's done that. That's first and foremost. You've got to have your sovereignty protected with a strong border. And then we've got to get out, starting with all the bad guys. It has had a flood, because I was asked just this morning, I think, on a show about, is alligator Alcatraz, is that too much? And what I said is, look, as governor, I will go to wherever we can find the right solution, maybe Camp Blanding, which is up more our way, Joe, that I can do it better, faster, cheaper. I'm always going to look for the cheaper solution if it's sound. But the reality is whatever alligator Alcatraz costs is far exceeded by the cost of free health care, the cost of gang violence, the cost of human trafficking, the cost of drugs. You talked about the fentanyl incident with this lady at a game. All of that's being brought in. We see over and over again. Criminal offenders who were criminal offenders when they crossed the border are still criminal offenders now. We got to get them out of our country. The president's right to do it. I'll be a great partner in battling the evil of illegal immigration as governor.
Well, I think when you go to a family like Lakeland Riley, you understand that there is no cost too big to monitor this immigration. You have your child who's in college on a career path to be a nurse or done life taken so abruptly, or the lady in Charlotte, her life that was taken so by crime being not taken so seriously. As we wrap up here, I'd like you to talk. How can people support you, and how can the listeners get in?
You can go to voterenner.com, which is, and then Renner, RNNE, vote, and we wherever county you love to have dollars into the bucket. Stay 23 million people, and we have it. I think when we do that, we're going to be victorious next August. The party will beat the Democrats, which is the most important thing, and we will not take a step backwards from what we build here in the free state of Florida.
Going to be your next title, governor of this great state of Florida. I want for coming on the show. I want to thank you for dropping in and welcome you back anytime. Love getting this information out to the listeners and to the public, and seeing your battles for our state and our freedom for our kids and their future. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
And remember, Florida, if we want to keep Florida the greatest place to live, work, shop, and play, We have got to make sure that we keep strong leaders who are not scared to stand for us with a proven track record to keep this the greatest state to live, work, shop, play. Have a great weekend.